a lot of times when explaining people gradients and temperatures and sizes of tank, people don't know what to get, and also there are numerous different resources that may say different things. And sometimes we also will get in species that the care sheets online are basically copy and pasted of a related species and not actually designed specifically for that species. Or as a rescue, things could come in suddenly and you need to get them set up quickly. Just a general rule for any of the temperature gradients to get you started as kind of a base. We do a third of the tank for each thing. And this warm side, this would be your under tank heat or your basking light, which I prefer. If they do not require lighting, we prefer under tank heat. But if they do require lighting, and especially like some of the monitors, the basking lights then get this up to the correct temperature. But it may be a little rounded at the edges, but most of this third you want to be that temperature. Then this side is your room temp. So it's it's just what a 70-ish or somewhere around there, whatever your room temperature is. And then this middle third is the gradient and kind of the buffer zone between the two, so that it's kind of goes gradually, because otherwise if you have the heat on just half of it, some of this heat is going to spill over into some of this room temp area. So what you want is a third that's this temperature and a third that's the room temperature, and the animal can go back and forth and choose where they need to be. And this is the general rule we use. It also helps people as the animal grows. You want the animal to be able to get completely on the warm side and completely on the cool side. And some of your animals, especially like leopard geckos, will curl up in a hide. So as long as they're just comfortable in a section that is the warm temp and the cool temp, you want them to be able to get completely into it. And then you have your middle section, and they'll go back and forth. Not all species require a temperature gradient, but the ones that do, this is just something to kind of get people started and to give them an idea of what they're doing. And then you can move on there with exact sizes and this and that, and differences in species. But most of our species that have a temperature gradient, we use the 1/3 method to determine how much is heat and how much is cool. So some of your territorial species where people are trying to have a breeding pair in the same enclosure, in order for each one to have an appropriate basking temp and area to be without guarding it from the other, sometimes people will have a large enclosure or a really long enclosure, and they will put a warm side at this end, your temperature gradient, and then at the other end you'll have the warm temp and your gradient, and maybe a little bit larger of a room temperature area, a little bit of a larger than what you would have in a single one. But they'll kind of divide it. Let me see if I can move this out a little bit. But kind of maybe a little bit larger room temp in that spot. And then you'll have the two warms and then the gradients and the room temp. This eliminates guarding of the basking site. We don't use it much, and you do have to have a rather large enclosure or really long enclosure to pull this off correctly to make sure that that middle section is the temperatures you need it to be. Because obviously that coming in from both sides with the heat, you have to make sure that this is still a lower temperature for the thermoregulation.